All right, we're just admitting a few more people, but those that are already on the call, if you would like to let us know who you are and where you're calling in from, it's always interesting to see. We had just under 80 people register for this webinar, which we're very excited about. And we'll be sending out the recording after. So also just in case somebody is not able to stay for the entire time, we will be sending through the recording.
Oh my God, we have everyone. USA, Dubai, Germany. That's brilliant.
No, amazing. A very warm welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for making the time for joining Corina and I on doing business in the Gulf right now. And it's a great pleasure to have you here. My name is Judith Cartwright. I'm the founder and CEO of Black Hole Consulting, and we're an asset management company focusing on commercial strategies, primarily in hospitality, but we're helping all sorts of businesses. And I've been in Dubai for the past 17 years. And it's a great pleasure to also welcome Corina Goetz from StarCat, who is very much active and working with a lot of clients and doing business in the Gulf for a very long time. And Corina, over to you to introduce yourself.
Well, nice to meet everybody. So I'm based in London in the UK, and again, my background is also very much hospitality. I've worked with a lot of high-profile clients from the Middle East when they come to London, and now I help companies understand strategy and how you market to that region. But I also, in general, I have a real love for this region. I go out there quite a lot, and I think we have a lot to talk about, like, for example, what some of the media, what it is like to be in Europe right now versus to what it is like to be in the Middle East. So I think there's so many interesting patterns emerging, and yeah, so we're excited to get started with everybody.
No, thank you very much, Corina. And this webinar really came about because Corina and I were talking not too long ago, and just with the different perceptions that everyone is seeing. So today, what we'll be talking about is the resilience, of the destinations versus the headlines. That capital is still moving, the demand patterns, how they're changing. Aviation is continuing to fuel the region, and then also how the Gulf is becoming more sophisticated and not just growing. And then we also have more from ST, global CoStar. He will be sharing with us some figures and some latest stats, hot off the press from hospitality. And the great news is that we're already starting to see a rebound of business travelers coming into the region. So in terms of resilience versus the headlines, Corinna, what are the headlines that you're seeing? And then also when you look at, when you're speaking with your clients that are actually on the ground here, how do you see the situation?
So it's a very interesting subject because when you follow the UK press, and it's a very similar situation when you look into Europe, because my wider family is in Europe and in Germany specifically. So the headlines are very different to what actually I'm hearing from the ground. So when you follow the UK media, the the overarching sentiment is basically, when you follow some of the papers and what you see online on the headlines are like, you know, oh, people are going to the war-torn Dubai and things like that, and it just makes you feel like somebody goes into like a proper war zone where you're really in danger and your life is in danger, and it's just not recommended. And this is the overarching sentiment here in the UK. And I think the reason behind that, and I want to explain this a little bit, because people actually are worried. They are worried about people in the region. They're worried about people going there on business. And they just think everybody says, oh my God, you need to stay away from this region, because people have in their head that there is, you like literally you live in the middle of the rubble, which couldn't be further from the truth. But that is really what the sentiment is over here. And I think the reasoning behind that is, and I want to explain this a little bit because, and people will say, oh my God, that's crazy. Why would they do this? But the reason behind this is that obviously, I think there's a lot of political reasoning behind this because just before this war started, there were a lot of people that were leaving the UK because, obviously some of the taxes had been increased and they were going to the Gulf, whether it be Saudi or Dubai or Qatar, to basically, have an improved life quality. And of course, that made the UK government lose a lot of taxes. So this war, in a way, came at a really good time for the government because now they could say, oh, great, look what you've done. You've moved out your whole family out there, but you're not safe. And then, of course, the reporting over here was very much lots of people are trying to get back because this is not what it was. And that really played a really big role because the government was like, great, they're now all coming back. We don't need to be saying that this is actually fairly safe on the ground. And this is why I think the reporting is the way it is. And I mean, I can definitely tell you, like from my own family, like my dad called me from Germany, and he said, well, I don't think you'll be going there for a very long time because it's very, very unsafe. And I said, but that's not what I'm hearing on the ground. Because every day when I talk to people in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai, in Saudi, in Qatar, they report a whole different situation. Business is still done. People are going out. Yes, you have these alerts, and it's obviously not great, and you have to be careful. But as Judith had said to me before, I think the odds of getting killed in a car accident are probably higher than from anything else. But that's just not what we're seeing here. And this is why I think it is so interesting. On the other side, I also want to say that for the UK, for example, as probably a lot of you guys know, and this is very similar, I think, in Germany and Italy or Switzerland, wherever you look, the client from the GCC is very, very important. So what I'm seeing in the London hotel market now is, for example, that all the London hotels are now also have emergency meetings because we are just right by the summer. And normally, London in the summer is very busy. Whether you look at hotels, whether you look at cars, whether you look at luxury brands, the GCC is a really, really big market for the London scene. So is, so it is for like Italy, Switzerland, and all of it. And whenever I speak to hotels in that sort of like European region, then I hear the same thing. What are you hearing? People are not traveling. They're all scared because it's the situation's so unsafe. But that's not actually the case. So I will tell you, for example, I have an Emirati client who has just decided to go. To go on his honeymoon into Switzerland, Germany, and they've been out there for probably about, I reckon, 3.5 weeks by now. I think he's in Zurich now, and he's been all over in Germany. So people are still traveling. Some of the people that I work with in Saudi, they have gone to have meetings in New York. They have gone to have meetings to London. I actually had one Saudi client who worked for PIF, and he's come to London, I think, 3 times in the last 3 weeks. So it's not like that business is not there. Business has, I think, it has just slowed down, but the perception is what is a real big problem here, I think, in Europe. And then when you come to the US, I just want to take a quick minute to talk about the US because I was on a call with some US people yesterday, and they were like, "Yeah, the situation is a disaster. Like nothing is working, nothing is moving, and we don't also need to be going out there." And I said, "Guys, I don't know what you've heard on CNN or something, but this is not what is happening." When like for me, obviously, I follow the news a lot from the region. And then I said to them, they're still moving ahead with deals, with business proposals. They're still meeting. You see people, if, for example, you look at places like Qatar, Sheikh Tamim was in Greece doing business. And those are the kind of things that we just don't hear about. And in the US, because they're even further removed, they hear even less. So I feel for us, it's very, very important to spread that message, and to tell people that this is not the case.
No. No, exactly. And that's really the key thing here. It's here in, I mean, I'm based in Dubai now, 17 years in the UAE, but I've been traveling in and out, for business meetings, and I have also received other business partners here in the UAE. It's still probably one of the safest areas or countries that you can be in. And on how we have been protected has just been absolutely amazing. The schools are back. Last week we had an unexpected 4-day distance learning again, but that's also what's so beautiful about the country. It's just then they switch on the distance learning again and it's seamless. It's not that a few days pass and the kids don't have any schooling. It's actually been quite incredible on how well managed everything has been. Within 24 hours when the conflict started, we were told, don't worry, you're safe. There has been an educational piece for all of us here in terms of how the skies are protected, where we can go. The fact that the airlines have been able to fly again, the Gulf carriers here, that they have been able to fly, and how many flights they have been able to service. And that's also, a key, really a key factor. But then not only that, but then also the tremendous job that, Emirates has done, that the hotels has done, also that the government has done in order to help then those that were stranded initially and how they have been able to get everybody home. The GCC countries and then also, the UAE has been built and has always been a destination for risk takers, a destination for people that are in here for the long term, and not for those that are here for the quick gains and for the quick money and then they leave again. And that's really key to see. I mean, here now the shift that we're seeing is, whilst then maybe certain businesses might slow for a short amount of time, but with every single crisis, whether it was the financial crisis, whether it was then also in 2015, the devaluation of the ruble, which had a big impact on the Russian visitors that were coming, whether it was then COVID that happened, every single crisis has made Dubai more resilient. And what I really love about the whole region and the GCC countries, they see every crisis as an opportunity. They learn from it and they move on. Decisions are made extremely fast and then they move on. And in about 5 minutes, Mo will join us on screen here in terms of showing us the demand that is coming in, and that's really where the data shows the first uptake already again for visitors coming back. None of the hotels, or I'd say 90% of the hotels here, they have also not gone out with crazy offers in order to recover the business because they all know that they're fighting for the same customer, but they're actually creating experiences. Some hotels, they have already been renovating, and then what happens usually in phases is now simply being expedited. And so that then renovations are happening quicker because they know that once the market is back and tourism will always be at the forefront in this destination and tourists will come back. And we've seen this really on how strong the recovery has been, from COVID and how quickly everybody has come here. And when you look at corporate companies, I was speaking last week with a company who has been planning to move their corporate office to the UAE, and they're still doing that because they still see, this region here, when you look at the world map, as the center of the world, and it's equally far or close, when you look at Sydney or when you look at New York or Cape Town, and just simply for the fact how many time zones their teams will be able to service very efficiently around the clock versus, having then multiple call centers around the region. So that's been very, very strong and also very promising. When you look at the housing market, there haven't been any, no major panic sales. There might be some people now that are, tight for cash flow. But the housing market is holding steady as well. There hasn't been a dramatic shift. And now in terms of hospitality, we're going and entering the shoulder season anyway, between, May and September. And then the outlook that Mo is going to talk to us about for Q4 is looking very strong and resilient. And that's also what we wanted to share with the rest of the destination. But my heart honestly bleeds when I see some of the international headlines, when I see some of the comments. I was in Cologne last month, and then they were saying, "Oh, how did you get here?" I said, "On a plane." Oh, but there are no taxis going in Dubai. It's just the amount of fake news that are out there, inconsistent news and incorrect news. And that's why, Corina and I wanted to do this webinar to really help answer some of the questions that people have. Or if some of you are hesitant of traveling into this region, it is safe. One of the key challenges that I see right now for tourism is because there is still a travel warning out here, or a travel advisory that you should not travel unless it's needed. That then some of the travel insurances might not be covering, then for that stay. But that's also very important now for hotels. Hotels that are also currently impacted, through the through lift is, going into the Maldives, Mauritius, and the Seychelles. But airlift is increasing again. And Emirates, there is not one destination that Emirates has in their network that they're not flying to. So that's also very important now to bear in mind. And I think with that now, Mo, I'm going to hand over the mic to you. I'm just going to share your slide quickly. And Corina, in the meantime, if you would like to, hang on, I've got it here. If there was anything else that you wanted to add that I haven't said yet.
No, I think that is pretty much it. I mean, I would also like to add that, for example, I also had a business associate that has just moved out to Dubai. So there is people that are still doing business. Some of the people that I was working with in Zurich, they've gone out for meetings. I've seen some of the hotel companies. Obviously, a lot of the UK hotels have pulled back from some of these trips to get the clients for the summer. But I have seen one or two hotel chains that have actually gone out now. And I think those will be the ones where the clients will be the most loyal, because they will say, they stood by us during this whole crisis. And I think for this region, this is very, very important. To show that you're there, that you're checking in, that you're talking to people. And then at the same time, I think also, a lot of the smaller flights that you had from, let's say, Abu Dhabi to Doha, they have all picked up again. But again, that's not something that's being reported here. I think we just see the big headlines, and also I feel like it's a little bit of my responsibility to call this out, because I hear this day in and day out. So this is why again, like Judith said, we wanted to do this webinar, especially for the people from abroad, to see that this is not all the truth that they hear and read.
There is a very strong sense of pride at the moment, from like all of us here living on the ground. And it's just in terms of on how much has been done, and also on how well the country is prepared, for anything, then also in the future. I mean, that is quite extraordinary. So that's really important. And then also, if somebody wanted to really go onto good channels to understand, what's actually what's true here on the ground, then I can recommend then gulfnews.com, because they always have the updated information on what's happening. We have been very well been kept informed. I mean, to a point where we had stats on how many missiles, drones, et cetera, were basically intercepted, and then also then the damages that have been done, if any, and how many have actually fallen into the sea. So that's just also very important to understand, because I've never really lived, I was fortunate enough not having to live in a conflict like that. And I always imagined that if there was a conflict, then everything is a war zone. So I can fully understand, when you're sitting outside of the country, that that's what you might be thinking. but it's actually not the case. It's the we were even able to take out the boat with friends, and we've been able to go out onto the sea. We've been able to go to the beaches and everything, you know. It's something that is a bit surreal when you read the headlines. And yeah, but that's just simply the reality, you know, because then otherwise then also as a mother of two children, you know, my husband and I, we would not want to stay here, then we would have left. But it's just the fact that we're still safer here than in other countries where you might have gun crime, knife violence, etc., etc. That's really important to see. Mo, are you able to see the STR slides on the
Yes,
screen?
I can. Yeah, you can
Okay,
hear me?
amazing. Then over to you.
Okay,
Thank you
thank you
very
so
much for
much.
joining us.
Thank you so much, Judith. I just would like to introduce myself. I'm Mol Hadi. I'm from the SDR and CoStar team. I've been with the SDR like for 4 years, and I've been living in Dubai for like 10 years now. So thank you so much for having us, Judith, and for arranging this time. So I'm going to take you through today in just a very like short and sweet to just share with you some stories, and like we will look at the data and see what is exactly telling us. Yeah, so we will not be delivering like a full optimist or pessimist stories here, but the data will tell it already. So when we start first looking at COVID, and just we want to remind ourselves with how the situation look around COVID, because we want to understand how is the demand always react to the first of its kind emotional impact when something new to happen to us, like COVID in 2019, like in Jan, Feb, and March, when the global pandemic was announced, the industry has dropped already by 80% worldwide, and GCC, of course, was also one of the regions that have the same impact. But moving from like Q1 was already the biggest hit, and start with Q2, you can see that the demand was already start to recover. And the first story that we could tell here is the recovery started before even the full certainty was confirmed. So we were still wearing masks, we will still have to maintain 2 meter distance, we still have to like all the outlets, all the airlines was operating with limited capacities and seats limitation, but you start to see a recovery. So the demand has shrunk from the 80% decline to by half two of 2020, okay, by to 40% of a decline. And the UAE was one of the leading, then KSA, it have a slight change because of the impact in holy cities. And the entire GCC was one of the fastest, already in seeing the full recovery already 2 years earlier than the entire rest of the world. Some slides that I didn't present here, but like even the entire recovery in GCC was fully by demand generated, compared to some other destination that up to this moment they haven't fully recovered into their demand level, and the recovery they see in revenue it's coming from only driving ADR increase. So that's the story that we can tell here, and that is the one line that we would all have to pick from the story, that the recovery. And when we will move to the following slide, that will be more clear when we will look at the data. So Judith, if you can switch to the next one. Yeah, exactly. So the ruling of the demand occupancy for week over week since the second week. We didn't present the first week because the was still holding the demand, because not everyone was able to leave from the people who were still until the airline open. Okay, but we can see from each major city within the GCC, from week over week, we start to see some slides. And when we speaking of the week that already was like 5 to 11 of April, that week was the ceasefire was announced, and we start to see a very big improvement across. So of course we can see some destinations as a bit delayed than the others, how they are relying and more into get away of the market and how they are relying to the international business, but it's across. So if we picking up Manama, for example, was flat on the weeks before the ceasefire start, but then they start to pick up. So from 15% only to cross 30%, and even in Dubai as well, it's the same story here. So this is what we can pick, and it's building up to the same story. Okay, so the demand has like start to see some signs of recovery, even in international side of the business, and we will dig deep dive in Dubai as well to have a more insights into that. Before the situation is fully sorted out, the entire full international capacity for airline has not fully recovered yet. And one of the reason here, and one of the point that we also have to stress, Judith, you have mentioned something very, very important, and Corina as well. It's about how the region from week 2 was accessible, and airport was operating more efficient and more accessibility better than like some of the other countries around the world. I'm not going to name it. I was in the US. Actually, I just returned yesterday, and I was advised in the 29th of April that I have to prepare for an 8-hour queue in JFK because of giving the current situation in GCC. So, and I traveled in Dubai on 18th of March. It took me 5 minutes in and out from the airport. So it was like, okay, compare the situation and how the airports and the region is still accessible in somehow. And when we will look at Dubai and dig deep dive, which is the next slide, Judith, please. So we will look at each sub-markets in Dubai and how it look like. Okay, so the story will be will even build up to the same as well, because Dubai have a lot of pattern of demand. So if you can present the next slide. Exactly. So that is each submarket in Dubai. So we would understand that submarkets were led by some staycation business also, like the Palm Jumeirah and the GPR. But look at Sheikh Zayed, for example, which was almost flat on the first couple of weeks, but then they start to see. So from hitting its bottom, okay, from 20%, now it's building up above 40%. So still the international business has not returned. The events are all shifted now. So yeah, but the demand is coming. That is also building the same story that we're all trying to deliver now. So if we go into summarize everything, and that will be the headline that will be in the next slide, it's about the demand recovery. So the data here is telling us that line, and that's actually my own belief. It will always beat whatever it's going to be in the headlines. We have seen that in COVID. I have seen that even in some presentation I have done also, even looking at situation from the financial crisis or even the Arab Spring as well. Also, the recovery it always happened before, like the headlines is fully clear and the media goes that it's safe to travel, as you know. And consider that if, for example, the demand has seen some improvement by double its own performance in just 3-4 weeks, and it's all an organic increase. So we can understand that already, like in the next couple of weeks, when everything will be, the airlines will start to recover. We haven't heard any information from international airlines that there will be more holding into like traveling into the region, so which is still, so we expect towards the end of May to have to start to see some recovery from that. So yeah, hopefully everything will be returned. So we still going through the shoulder season and summer. Okay, consider as well the World Cup, it's happening, so some of the demand that could have come during the summer as well from similar to the previous years might already shifting like towards the World Cup, to attend the World Cup in Canada, US and Mexico. But I wouldn't see any opportunity that we should be panicking from now to Q4, because we have seen the bottom of the emotional impact, as we have seen it in COVID, as we have seen it in some other thread, we have seen it in the first couple of weeks. So we start to see the outlook up to this moment is still holding its position. Our official outlook is coming out end of this month, and we're going to distribute that, and we can even catch up on that. So yeah, thank you so much, and that is my contact. If you have any question or concern, just please feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Mo. And it's really encouraging to see that recovery. And it's like Sir Tim Clark from Emirates said, that the people, they tend to forget very quickly when things happen. It's also like when I look at, different situation, but when I look at, I have some clients in Mexico, and they had the shooting at the beginning of the year, from the cartels. That had also put a bit of pressure on the destination, but then very quickly it came back. The tourism industry is the most resilient industry there is, because people always want to travel. After COVID, we had the revenge travel, because that just simply a lot of people weren't able to travel. And the nice thing about the destination here, it also now gives this destination an opportunity to readjust their market segmentation, because the destination has always been very much reliant on wholesale and DMC production. But it's also now an opportunity from a strategic side to go more after the direct, and then also some of the travel agencies that book directly with the hospitality sector or with the tourisms. But everything that comes around with it too, it hasn't slowed down. Emirates, they have just now announced a 20+ week bonus to their employees, also as a thank you for everything that they have mastered. And then at the same time, then also because they simply had a record-breaking year in 2025 for their financial year. That's also a very strong statement in terms of on how then the major airline sees the recovery coming into the destination here. In terms of from a bigger strategic side of things now, it's the people, they're adjusting on how to invest the money here and where to invest the money. They will be a lot more selective. They'll be able to really go in now with a laser focus to really see, okay, where is then the resilient opportunity, and how can we, and that the Gulf is still a very attractive place. And I've been recently to the Sheikh Zayed National Museum in Abu Dhabi. And I've learned so much about the destination here, but also on how often they actually had to reposition, not reinvent, but really take another opportunity in order to build themselves stronger. And that really also started with the whole pearl industry that they had initially. And then when Japan started to introduce the cultivated pearls, that was really the first crisis that forced them really to reinvent on where the business is coming from. So that's been very, 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 very powerful. In terms of the outlook now, Corina, from your side, anything that you would like to add or anything that you're seeing that we haven't covered yet?
I mean, I would definitely say, and I would say that moving forward, this is what I say to a lot of companies here. You have to, and I think this is so important to know about this region. I feel especially like the UAE, they run the country like an entrepreneur, and I've said this before, because and because, like you said, Judith, they try something, it doesn't work, they try something else, they pivot, they move it. But what that basically means for the reporting out here in the West, it's very much like they say, and I'll give you an example, for example, with Saudi. They say, oh my God, this whole Neon project now failed because like they starting to change everything. But they changing because the goals have changed. What they wanted in 2016, we're now in 2026. This is 10 years later. Every company undergoes changes because things are not the same. And this is why I say to companies here, you need to change your mindset, and you need to think about things are not always the same. You have to pivot, you have to adjust to the market. Look at it from the angle of, you, in order to move forward, we have to evolve, we have to grow. And that's, I think, what the UAE or the region as a whole, I think, does so well. And that gets very misconstrued over here because we do like negative headlines, and we like to, and we always like to just focus on the negative rather than focusing on the positive. But it's very much because it's very clickbait driven, because it drives traffic, and that's how people look at it here. So to me, it's actually very inspiring when I look to the region and I see how they innovate and how they invent things and all of these kind of things. And that's why I constantly talk about. And one of the other things I will say, and I don't know how much of interest that is, and you probably know this because or a lot of you that are in the region know this, is like the whole AI adaptation and knowledge, is so far advanced in the Gulf versus like when I look at the UK, for example, here, because in the UAE, you have your Minister of AI, you have AI on the school curriculum. I mean, we are so far away from this here in the UK. When I talk to hotels about AI and things like that over here, I mean, they've barely gotten to grips with social media by now. And the way things have moved, things have changed, and LinkedIn has become a much more interesting platform, especially for the GCC. So I think, when you have to look at it both ways, and this is why I think sometimes there is this breakdown of culture where the West always thinks they're very much superior to the Gulf, but the Gulf has actually already like moved far beyond, and they've already implemented far beyond to what the West can comprehend. And
No, exactly. Yeah.
yeah, and this would be, yeah, this is something I
Yeah.
feel very strongly about. So there
Yeah.
you are.
No, and it's just really, it's just the Gulf does not pause for, when there is uncertainty, it really adapts to it and just sees then on how things can be changed, how things can be implemented. And COVID was a very good learning curve, here, then also not to make yourself dependable on from the outside world when it came to goods and products. Now we have the largest vertical farms when it comes to vegetables and fruits. And then in the beginning, there were images circulating on social media that the shelves are empty. Our shelves were never empty. We're still getting everything that we need to, and there haven't been any panic buys like you would have seen in some of the other countries. When they said, "Oh, because of the what's happening now in the Strait." And the operators that we see winning now, then also now when we look a bit further ahead in the future, those are not necessarily the biggest, but those are the ones that will be most agile, that are nimble to change, and that will not just simply accept the status quo, but that will look at, okay, how can we really now optimize this and change that? And it's not really the supply growth that is the story; it's more the demand sophistication. And what we've been seeing now is then also a transition from growth at any cost to really intelligent profitability. So that's also with everything. It's almost like you have to do a reset of what's working, and take a step back, reevaluate what's happening, what's working, what can be fine-tuned. And those are really then the biggest opportunities for any company here that you can have. It's just the whole agility in the destination has always wowed me. And then, in a situation like we've had, it was also during Ramadan. And I think that's also something that's important not to forget. And the leaders, they have been visible straight away. They don't just tell you it's safe. We've put the safety net in place. They make themselves visible. They don't hold press conferences, like you would see with other countries and other leaders. They just simply come into the shopping mall and they have their iftar there amongst pretty much anybody and everybody who just happens to dine at that restaurant, without big tam-tam, without any promotion. They're just there. It was then also there is at the end of March, there's always a very big horse race. It's the most expensive horse race from a prize money that can be won around the world. And Sheikh Mohammed was there, and that was before the ceasefire. And these statements, they just simply give confidence to everybody who's living here. They give confidence to the region. And those are the items that the international press doesn't pick up. And that's really, that's just been very, very impressive on how that has been managed and how that has been, and how that has been done, for anybody then also living here. What I would like to do maybe in between is I'd like to open up to the audience. If you would like to ask questions, feel free to put the questions into the chat. We had here one, for example, not a question, but also like from Amal. She said, I lived in Abu Dhabi through every global and regional crisis since 2000, and I've never seen a stronger government or a more resilient market. The West does not like that. And Philippe said, from STR, travel advisories are really not helpful or warranted. Dirk Wagner said, sure, business in Dubai works well, a bit slower, but safe. That's the important stuff. Even flights from Germany to Dubai had around 95% capacity. And I think that's a very important point, actually. The fact is that flights aren't just simply going. The flights are full. So it's both ways. It's not just simply from Dubai outbound into destinations, but also from destinations back into Dubai. Whether it's the people that are coming to this region here or whether they're transiting on to other destinations. Yeah, and then also exactly, Dirk, that's been also a very, very strong measurement by the government. What they have put in place is that they took care of making sure that the prices in supermarkets are stable. So it was straight away, they've put in measurements that if anybody, consumer or anyone else saw that prices would be jumped up unjustifiably in supermarkets, that somebody was taking, advantage of the situation, they could be reported and straight away, then it would have been dealt with. But to avoid that from happening, they just simply put that in place pretty much straight away. There was a question for Mo. If you don't mind, may I know where the data from Mo's PowerPoint is from? So Mo is working for CoStar, STR Global. And what hotels do, and Mo, you can explain this in a second better than I do, but what hotels do in the region, they submit their data for occupancy and ADR to a third party. And then the third party is aggregating that and then makes that visible to those who have described.
Yep, so
Right,
that's
Mo?
well said. Yeah, perfect. Yeah,
Thank
you
you.
still got, yeah, thank you.
And then I still have it, right? And then Amal has a question for Corina. Apart from the efforts done by the government and private sector, what would you recommend that can be done in the UK and beyond?
I think what it needs, I think it needs more independent voices. I guess somebody like me, for example, who says this is what it is, and this is what the situation is. I don't necessarily think that there is a lot more because, also people over here are very cynical and they will say, oh yeah, but the government said this or this. Yeah, we can't really trust all of this. So I think it needs more individual people speaking up. And I think, for example, we are so lucky now that we have all of these incredible social media platforms. And I know there's pros and cons with social media, but I think the more we talk about this kind of stuff, the more people learn. And I think what is important to say is that there's so much creativity in the region, and there is so many really good things that just you don't hear about. And I think if we build all of this up a bit more and speak up more on places like LinkedIn or whatever it may be, Instagram or any of those, then I think more people will see and also share that to to your wider family and friends and anyone you speak to, because this is the only way people will learn. And I always use this analogy because a lot of my childhood friends from Germany would go and say, "Are you going to Saudi? Why would you go to Saudi? Like they have no human rights or this, that, and the other." So people will always go and say to me, "I just don't understand. You're like a woman. Why would you put yourself in that position?" And then when I then actually explain some of it and I say, look, in places like Saudi or Dubai, I actually do feel a lot safer than I do over here. I mean, in here, so I'm like in the middle of London. My apartment is literally next to a tube station, and that's very deliberate because I don't want to be in a position where at 10 o'clock at night I come back from a dinner and I have to walk 10 minutes to my apartment, because it's just simply not safe and you don't know what can happen. And this is unfortunately the reality in a lot of the big towns in Europe. And I think, if we can show that region a little bit more to and break these stereotypes, then the whole thing I think can become like a movement, because it's not just me who can speak out, because not everybody like listens to me or whatever. So the more people do, I think the more people will understand. And I think that is particularly true for I think also like for the next generation, because we don't really want to pass on these kind of stereotypes that we've been fed all of our lives. Um, to the next generation. So I'll give you one more other quick example. So for example, my niece who's 13, she lives in this tiny village in Germany. I mean, even Dubai is very exotic to where she lives. And she obviously, because now they have they have things like WhatsApp and you can put pictures on your WhatsApp status. So my niece now always tracks where I am. And then she says, "Oh, where's this? Oh, you've been in Saudi. Oh, you've been in Dubai. This looks really nice." And now she's on the case with my sister to say basically, "Oh, I really want to go there." So for me, that is really great because, nobody in her school will talk about places like Saudi or maybe Dubai a little bit, but not places like Saudi or Qatar because they barely even know how to find it on the map. But then if you have somebody in your immediate family that talks about it, this is how you can influence the next generation and show them there is different way, like, leave all these stereotypes behind and maybe talk to somebody who actually knows, who's been there, who's talked to people, who's been to places. So that would be the answer, Amal.
No. No, that's very good. And then also, by the way, and that's something I did not expect when the schools were going back, but I'm still stuck in the same traffic jams, on the school runs, on the way homes or in the evenings, and the roads are packed. But at the same time, new bridges have opened up, new flyovers have opened up, new projects have been announced across the region. It does not stand still. And last week there was a launch for an off-plan sale from one of the developers here. And they had so much demand that they actually did it in the Coca-Cola arena. And it was a sellout within 4 hours. If we don't have any additional questions, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. And we'll be sending the recording to everyone.